now at last.
Ah,
as far as
this
we're all
is the
concerned,
moment
we look forward to this.
Yes, this is the moment we've been waiting for.
Shane Warne coming on and taking off his floppy hat to reveal a shock of blonde hair.
'Twas the first test of the Ashes series, 1993.
An earring in one ear as well.
Australia had only managed 289, and we
I haven't got a ponytail there.
felt all was going to plan. That first innings at Old Trafford, then Merv Hughes and his handlebar moustache dismissed poor Arthurs.
He hasn't got a ponytail, he's got these new shave jobs, a number 2 or 3 razor around the back and rather more hair on top.
I knew that I had little cause to fear their young leg spinner.
I just wonder, Trevor, there must be, I would think, a little bit of pressure on young Warne's shoulders here, because he'll know that his team are expecting him to come on and take some wickets here, or at least turn the ball.
Well, if he doesn't turn the ball, England will have a very good time indeed.
At first the ball
And here
looked
comes
straight enough.
Shane Warne.
I had it in my sights.
Off only 2 or 3 paces.
But such was its rotation that it swerved out to the right.
He bowls and
I thought, well, that's a leg break. That's easily defended. So I stuck my left leg out and jammed my bat against it.
Gatting is taken on the pennies, bowls.
Ball it span obscenely, and out of the rough it jumped. Veered back across my bat and pad, clipping my off stump.
Well, Gatting's still standing there. He can't believe it, but that must have turned a very long way. We haven't got a view of this, but it took his off stump. Gatting can't believe it.
It was jiggery, pokery, trickery, jokery. How did he open me up?
That is Shane Warne's first delivery in a test match in England. Mike Gatting is still walking off now, shaking his head. He just can't believe it at all. Bowled for 4.
Who is this nobody making me look a buffoon? Like an accident-prone balloon.
Tossed up and pitches around about outside the leg stump and turns absolutely. That turns feet.
That was a Jaffa.
And it's taken the top of the off stump.
That was an absolutely beautiful delivery.
Well, he's got a huge smile on his face.
If it had been a cheese roll, it would never have got past me.
That's unplayable.
It was jiggery, pokery, trickery, jokery. How did he open me up?
And that, I'm sure, will send a shockwave right through the England dressing room, because that didn't pitch in the rough. That turned off the pitch.
I might as well have been holding a cob of corn. Jiggery, pokery, who is this nobody making me look so forlorn? I hate Shane Warne.
That was a glorious ball.
It was the perfect leg break. First ball in an Ashes series to do it. I look back at it and say, yes, it was a fluke, but I think it was meant to be. And it did change my life. There was this, I was 22 or 23 years of age, and I didn't know how to cope with the attention off the field. Like, I'd walk out of the hotel and the whole team would walk out, but there'd be 20 photographers taking pictures of me.
There you go. Shane Warne speaking about his ball of the century, and it's so sad he's not here for the 30th anniversary of that moment. And before that, you heard music from the music group, the Duckworth-Lewis Method, with their song Jiggery Pokery. And let's give Trevor Bailey a mention there as well. Jaffa. Chose his words very carefully, did Trevor, and I think he absolutely summed it up perfectly. We couldn't see it. It was an extraordinary moment. So, 30 years on, Mike Gatting is back here at Old Trafford. He's going to be attempting to play that ball again as a simulator here at the ground, where he can have a go at facing exact replicas of famous deliveries, including that ball from Shane Warne. And I've been talking to Gat about a moment that he's been asked about, as you can imagine, quite a few times before.
Many times, and I have to say, I only watched it just recently for the first time for a long time, but it seemed a pretty decent ball, and it was one of those things that you know, you're thinking about many things at that time of the proceedings, but we'd never seen Warne before. So, you know, it was just quite an interesting sort of concept just before lunch, seeing somebody you've never seen bowl before.
And when you do see it then, like the other day on the telly, are you trying to play it again in your mind?
A little bit, yeah, because, you know, we often talked, myself and Warne and actually Heels as well, behind the stumps, because he had just as difficult a job as I did trying to get hold of it, or would have done, I suspect. But, no, I mean, I just remember this guy coming on, it was just before lunch, and Gucci said, well, let's make sure we're here at lunch still, Gat. And I said, OK, fine. So I was just thinking about playing out the over, and, you know, the guy at the other end was... So he told me was, you know, when AB asked him to bowl, he just said, make sure you pitch it up and bowl it straight, and don't give him any room. And so I was expecting it, you know, somewhere in the region. You never know, somebody's first ball in Ashes history might have been nervous, but it didn't look like it when it came down. It really came out of his hand fizzing. And it was really the last 2 or 3 yards when, because it was spinning so much, that it actually really dipped in quite quickly. So from me thinking about actually defending the slip area, I was thinking about, crikey, all of a sudden I'm thinking, it might bowl around my legs. And so, you know, you make those decisions, because it's coming through there slow enough, you sort of can make that decision. But the last 3 yards, all of a sudden it was I better look at something else here. And that's what happened. And so instead of doing it the way I was going to do it, which is defend slip, I'm now defending my leg stump.
And a combination of drift, spin, but also the pace of it, because it wasn't a slow ball, was it? It didn't flight it.
No, he didn't. I mean, he literally said when we talked about it, he tried to get it down the end as quick as he could and as full as he could and as much spin on it as he could, and he'd just let the wicket dictate what happened. And I mean, had it gone straight on, it would have been a very poor ball, because it would have gone down there and it wouldn't have made a difference. But because it spun and spun so much, and it would have had to pitch somewhere in that same area to actually hit the top of the off bail and spin that much. It couldn't have. I mean, it must have been, you know, just the smallest spot on the pitch ever, outside leg stump, and you know, it turned up. Remember, it was day 2. It was only lunchtime, just before lunchtime, day 2, and it spun that much. And I'm going, what do you do? And then, you know, when I've missed it, and because I didn't hear the ball hit the stumps. And therefore, the first thing I heard was Ian Healy asking me to leave politely, or as politely as they do in those. And so, you know, I was sort of looking and thinking, one bail on the floor when I looked round. And I thought, well, Ian Healy must have just, you know. And then I heard Heels ask me to leave again, and I looked down the other end. Dickie was up there shaking his going, and he looked at square leg, and square leg sort of went like that, and that was it. Off I went, and I upset the captain as well by getting out just before lunch.
But it's a funny one, because Graham Hick had given him a real pasting in the match before at Worcester. He was relatively unknown, wasn't he? I mean, how much had you seen of him bowl, if at all? I mean, these days there'd have been loads of videos and analysis and so on for you to have seen of this new young wrist spinner. But what did you have then, back in the day?
Well, we had nothing. We saw a couple of old video clips of, I think, a couple of test matches he played in. One was in the West Indies, I think, and maybe one in India. Played a test match or two, and that was about it. But I mean, I know for a fact now that you know, AB said to Warne in the Worcester match, just bowl leg breaks, don't bowl anything else. But you know, even to this day, you know, you just sort of, you know, you like, and you sort of give yourself a chance to have a look at the first ball, don't you, normally? Yes. It's what your master used to tell you. Have a look, see what the pitch is doing, see if it's spinning, see if it's turning, see if it's bouncing. All those sort of things, and the fact that I was in a very sort of let's get to lunch mode as opposed to let's get after this young man. But it was in such a good place, and it did swing in quite late, and, you know, I'm not sure, even if I was in, how you would play that, because I never got that far.
I remember turning up next day, and you were out there in the middle with the groundsman and a tape measure. You're sort of measuring out where it had come from, and the amount that it had drifted initially. That was the main thing, wasn't it? And then, is there any way you could have played it? I mean, really, you must have analysed it so many times. You must have gone to bed that night thinking about it, and probably from every day since then.
I'm not sure I went to bed thinking about it. I have to say, I couldn't do anything about it. Once I watched it on the TV, I thought, well, there's not really much I could do about that. In that situation, having been the first ball ever that he'd bowled, and the timing of it, and now having seen it and I know which way it's going, it's going to be a little bit easier to defend the stumps, because I know it's not going to bowl me around my legs now, which was what I was worried about. So, you know, for me, it'll be very interesting to still see whether or not I can actually get a bat on it, because it did spin quite quickly and it did spin quite a long way. So that's going to be quite interesting this afternoon, having a go, having not picked up a bat for a little while.
It will be. I'm looking forward to getting the results of that, Michael. As far as you and Shane were concerned, I mean, did you talk about it much? I mean, you see Mike Atherton and Glenn McGrath, who had a big hold over Mike, and this sort of Michael sort of goes round past him quickly. What was your relationship with Shane like? Because I guess you wouldn't have known him before then.
No, not really. I mean, you know, the fact is the man is you know, sadly not with us anymore, and you know, the amount of joy and the the amount of inspiration he's given both grown-ups and older, well, the younger guys as well, and all the things he's done. When he's commentated, he's really, made the game enjoyable. He wanted the game to be fun. He wanted people to understand it and come and watch it and make it the best it can be. So, for me, Warne, when we sort of sat down and talked about it, he just kept saying, he said, just try to get it down the other end and spin it as hard as I could, mate. And he said, you're just a bit unlucky. He said that it landed. And that was really what it was. Now, after that, we know how great a bowler he would be. And, people will say at this point in history he's probably the greatest of all time. And the fact is that, he learnt his trade over the time. So maybe, as we saw on a number of occasions, he did get the ball in the right place to a lot of people and spun it a long way. So, that particular ball, I'll just take it that it was one of those balls that you get bowled occasionally, like somebody like Glenn McGrath, who's, bowls it quicker, so you can't do much about it. If he pitches middle, hits the top of off, you can't do much about it. With a spinner, you think you can adjust, but it just fizzed. It really, that's all I can say. It fizzed, and it turned quickly, and it bounced, and it just hit the top of the off bail.
Now, this challenge then you're doing shortly, Mike, tell us about it, because it does involve facing the ball of the century, isn't it? But do you know when it's going to come?
Well, I don't know. I've been told I've got 6 balls, right. So I'm hoping to have a few throwdowns first, because I haven't picked up a bat for 5 years. So we'll have to see. But the nice thing is they're going to give me £1,000 for each run I get. Now, I don't know who's actually scoring this, but I believe the computer's got scoring areas. Right. So I've got 6 balls to face. Now, I hope the first one is going to be the ball of the century, because my eyes aren't quite as good as they used to be. So picking the wrong or the toppy might be slightly more difficult than it used to be. But we'll see. But if it's first one ball of the century, then I've got a chance, and I'm sure that one won't bowl me.
What are you going to do?
Well,
pitched outside leg, didn't it?
Outside leg, so I could have a sweep at it. I just felt it was too full at the time, and I'm probably watching it the other day. It's probably still a bit full, so maybe I'll charge down the wicket and try and get it before it bounces.
I bet you don't.
No, I'm not that quick either these days, so we'll have to wait and see. But certainly it'll be fascinating for me, I have to say. That's why I've come up, and it'd be nice to see, what I think about it.
Tell us about the cause that you're raising money for.
Yeah, look, it's a cause. IG, who one of the England sponsors, have got they're an asset fund manager, and they're actually going to have, it's called IG Net Gains Fund, which I believe pounds are being given to all the people that go into the simulator. And the runs they get against any sort of bowlers will be going into a fund that will go back into club cricket for nets and facilities for those clubs that are in less well-off areas. So it's a fantastic fund, and I think if I don't get any runs or don't hit it, I think they're going to give us 10,000 anyway. So they've been brilliant. So it's a great pleasure to do it, and I just hope I can get a bat on it, Angus.
So do I. Good luck, Gav.
Thank you.
As you heard from my commentary, the original moment back in '93, I didn't have the best vantage point, with my view obscured by Ian Healy, the wicketkeeper, and the first slip, Mark Taylor. So earlier today, I went onto the field to stand in that very spot and share memories of that day with the former Australia captain.
Well, first I've got to apologise to you, haven't I? Because I blocked your view.
You did.
I've been asked a lot, actually, coming over here. And the worrying thing, Angus, is that it's 30 years ago. That worries me, because I don't feel that old, but obviously I am. But it was a great day, obviously a great day for Warne, for Australian cricket, because I think a lot of us in the Australian side knew how good Shane Warne was. We didn't know he was going to take 708 test wickets, but we knew he was a fine bowler. And I think that ball introduced him to, well, not so much the world, but certainly English cricket. Australian cricket knew about him, but English cricket thought, oh, wow, hang on, this guy can actually bowl, and can bowl some wonderful deliveries. He just went from that wicket to 708 of them.
Did you know he was capable of bowling something like that?
Absolutely. Yes, I did. I'd seen Warne probably 2 or 3 years before that. I took a side to Zimbabwe, a younger Australian side, which I captained, and Steve Waugh was vice-captain of that tour. And Warne went on that tour, and we saw him bowl balls like that. We saw him bowl flippers that actually swung in to right-handed batsmen and got them out square cutting, particularly Davey Houghton and Andy Pycroft, two fine players in that series. They will tell you about Shane Warne and how he could drift the ball, how he could bowl a flipper but also spin it and bowl consistently. And that was probably the biggest key of Warne's career, was that he could land that leg spinner almost on a dime and 5 or 6 them and over. Not 3 or 4, but 5 or 6, and that made him the great bowler he was.
So what do you remember, Mark? Approaching tee, Gat, I think, was on 4. Gooch and Atherton had put quite a lot on for the first wicket. Approaching tee, Alan Border decides, OK, we're going to bring him on. And you're at slip. Can you remember? Can you set the scene? What's your memory like of that particular time?
I think my memory would be like any other when Warne came on. I'd grab him a spot at first slip, which is about 45-degree angle to the stumps, and get ready in case the batsman nicked one. And then I see this ball that, drifts in, which didn't surprise us because he did put a lot of revs on the ball, which gave it that drift in. But then the spin. That was the thing, it surprised every one of us, I think, particularly his first ball.
It was a loosener.
Yeah, that's right. And I think Warne said a few times, yes, he was just trying to get it down there, somewhere round about the stumps, and maybe spin it away a bit, and then get into his spell. And that drifted, as all the thousands of replays we've seen since showed how much it drifted in, just opened Gat up enough and then ripped past his back leg. I think it may just have brushed the pants on the way through and clipped the top of off. You could not have scripted a better ball for a leg spinner to bowl for their first ball in Ashes cricket.
Could Gat have played it? I remember turning up next morning and he's out here with his tape measure and with the groundsman trying to work out. And he said, my foot wasn't in the right... I could have played it. But his foot was in the right place. His pad was in the right place to start with. Yeah. It was the drift that killed him. Yeah, and all those things that contributed to it was the drift, was the fact he's looking to get forward to start with, and then he moved the front leg out of the way. If he'd have gone on the back foot, say, and played very front on, it would have hit him on the pads and the ball pitched outside leg, so it wouldn't have been out. No. So, yes, he could have played it differently, but you've got to put all those contributing factors into it. He's thinking forward, the ball's not short, but it drifts down the leg side. So he thinks, here we go, this is going to skid on, and I might be able to work this around the corner for one. And then it rips across him, day 2 of the test match? Yeah. Like, it's not as if it's day 5. You're not expecting the ball to turn like that on day 2. So all those factors contributed to the way he played it and made it, as people say, the ball of the century. The great challenge for Mike, because you may have seen it set up, Mark, I'm not sure, roundabout, you can set up these deliveries. Have you seen it with a tennis ball and a bowling machine, and you can actually rig it for various deliveries? They've set it up for that delivery, and Gat is going to go and face it out there.
What now?
Yeah. What do you reckon his chances are?
Probably worse than they were 30 years ago.
Yeah, probably. But, I mean, if he tried to put everything in place, I mean, what would you do? Just kick it away?
Kick it away. Yeah. Just, rather than take the front pad out of the road, just push the front pad towards the ball somewhere with the bat somewhere near it, and you're probably going to smother it because you know what's coming. But that's the beauty of live sport, isn't it? You don't know what's coming.
I'll let you know how he gets on, Mark. Just a last thought. There's this story, I don't know where it came from, that when you played Worcestershire the match before, and the second innings, Graham Hicks smashed 180 odd and took Shane Warne to the cleaners, actually. He got, 120 odd off 20 overs. Yeah. But the word was from Alan Border to Warne, don't show him what you've got. Keep everything up your sleeve, and we'll wait for the test matches. Now, is there any truth in that at all, do you think?
I think there's a little bit of truth in it, yes. But Warne always had various stories about 20 different deliveries and the surprise ball, the new ball he always going to have.
The
Zooters, all that sort of stuff. The mystery ball. I think, looking back at that game, Warne, certainly not in test match mode, certainly not in the competitive mode that he would have been at Manchester a week later. And I can't recall him bowling flippers and trying those things at Worcester. But don't get me wrong, he wasn't giving Graham Hick 180 either. He didn't enjoy being smashed out of Worcester's home ground like he was. But did he bowl all his deliveries? I don't think so. But the difference was he came here to Manchester and bowled that ball first up, and that changed everything.
Lovely to catch up with you, Mark. I'll let you know how Gat gets on.
Thanks, mate. I'm back and warning you again.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, Tubbs. Perfect. Thank you. There we go. Lovely to hear from Mark Taylor, who's here working for Channel 9 TV. So, reflecting on that ball, but let's push a bit wider too and just talk about Shane from someone who knew him so well, his famous partner in crime, of course, Glenn McGrath, who didn't play in that game, did you, Glenn? Of course,
No.
just preceded you. But how long did it take you to see it? I wonder. Were you watching it when it happened, or were you?
Yeah, I'm trying to think exactly where I was. Sort of June 1993. I did go down to the Cricket Academy for a second year, along with Ricky Ponting. Ricky Ponting was there in 92 and 93 as well, and we were watching a lot of the Ashes in the evening at the Cricket Academy based in Adelaide. So I would have been there, and we've seen that ball probably 1,000 times since then. It's one of those balls that just gets replayed when it's about cricket and ball of the century or incredible deliveries. It's always there. So I've seen it about 1,000 times since then. I'm just trying to recollect exactly where I was when it happened.
Well, you bowled some decent balls in your time, Glenn, I'll give you that. On a scale of 0 to 10, where would that ball have been in terms of unplayability?
Well, you saw how Gatt played it. He was a very good player of spin, and he went to sort of fend it, even pat it away, and it turned square. And I don't think he'd ever seen anything like it, nor had a lot of people sort of watching cricket or in the game itself. And throughout Shane's history, his career, I saw a lot of balls. Some of them barely pitched on the cut surface. It was so
Andrew
wide.
Strauss seemed to get most of them.
Strauss, he got a couple. I remember one to Shivnarine Chanderpaul. It nearly pitched on the edge of the pitch, right on the edge at Sydney. He went back to cut it, and it just turned back and just about ripped his leg stump out, not even the off stump. So, it was one of those things. But, you look at that in sort of just the revs and energy that he puts on through the crease, and the revolutions on the ball just sort of dips and drifts, and as soon as it pitches, it just turns square. It's I'm sure we heard Gatt talk about it there, and you sort of recollect, you go through and go, how could I have played that any different? You probably couldn't have. And for first ball, like not even a warm-up delivery, to land exactly where he wanted it like that, it's an incredible delivery.
But that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it says a lot about the character of Shane Warne that he didn't just think, let's get one down there. He put so much on that first ball that he bowled. That's not many people would have done that, let's be honest. And bowling the sort of bowling that he was doing too, which is so difficult for control, to have the confidence in yourself to go out there and bowl a ball like that first ball says a lot about him, I would have thought. Oh,
exactly. And that was a man. He was super confident. He backed himself. He loved the big stage. Everything about it was who he was. And, he just, you see some leg spinners come on first ball at full toss or a half tracker or something, but that was perfect. And there were so many times he did that. So, he was the ultimate competitor, firstly, and backed himself in every situation. So, it wasn't. If it was ever going to happen to any cricketer, it was probably going to happen to Shane, and it did.
Actually, hearing Mark Taylor there talking about sort of Shane and his stories, because he was a big kind of storyteller, wasn't he? Exaggerator and blower-upper of things.
He always loved telling stories, and loved exaggerating. If the number sounded way too big, but it sounded really impressive, then. Yeah, it probably was, and vice versa. It was a little bit too small. So, there were so many times you come in and you put the Warne tax on it. You just divide it by a bit, or you add a bit here or there. But I think there was one time in the West Indies in '99 where he came in. It was a tour match. We were batting, and he's carrying on about how many pairs of socks he's had stolen and lost on tour. And he goes, come away with 50 pairs of socks. And he goes, who has 50 pairs? I don't have 50 pairs of socks, but Shane obviously does. He brought them all away with him, and he's going on. Every time he puts him in the wash and they get, they knock him off, housekeeping steals. He said, I've only got 12 pair left. I have no idea how I'm going to get through the rest of the tour. And he's going on and on about it, as Shano did. And he heads back outside, and Ian Healy jumps up and goes, I've worked Warne out. Whatever Shano starts with, you halve. Whatever he finishes with, you double. Went, okay, so he started with 50, halved that 25, finished with 12, double that 24. Shane lost one pair of socks, but only Warne can turn one into 38. So that's sort of how Warne... But, there was so many other times he had incredible stories. And but a lot of them were actually true. He was just a normal person, but just lived this extraordinary life. And the one thing I'll say about Shano is, unfortunately, he only lived for 52 when he passed away, but he probably lived more in that 52 years than most of us would live in 2 or 3 lifetimes.
Yes.
He lived the way he wanted to live his life. He was a special person. He was, I think he was quite honest with himself as well. He said he didn't make a good husband, but he made a very good father, and I think that was very true. He loved his kids. He did a lot with them, and you always feel for them. The way they spoke at his funeral and memorial service was incredible. But yeah, he was an amazing man, and I feel truly lucky to have had him in my life and to be bowled the other end from him in a lot of my career.
Yeah, and how did that start? Because you were like a little team within the team, weren't you? You and Shane Warne bowling together, an incredible combination. Because in both ways, although they're very different bowlers, you're actually very similar bowlers, and that you both hated giving runs away, both building up loads of pressure. Yeah. So how did that come about? How did it work?
I think it just started because we're both in the team. Warne had been in there probably sort of 8-12 months before me. It started sort of cemented his place in the team, and I came in. I was just a sort of fairly new to the game. I'd only played half a dozen first-class games, and then as it went on, we realised we're totally different bowlers in fast bowler leg spinner. Yeah. But where we were similar was we had really good control, so we could bowl the ball exactly where we wanted it to, which allowed the captain to set the fields they wanted. We could bowl to it and build pressure, and that's how you take wickets. And and then through our career, it just evolved from there. And it was funny. I remember midway through our career having a chat with Shane, and he goes, when we retire, we should retire at the same time. And I didn't give it much thought. I remember, when Greg Chappell and Rod Marsh and Dennis Lee retired, they all retired in the same match there, and I thought it might have been something along there. But the more I thought about it was, if we retire in the same game, he started before me, so he'll definitely finish with more Test wickets. So I wonder if he had a bit of an agenda, Shano. But no, and the way it worked out, I remember waking up one day in those 607 series and just knew it was time for us to hang the boots up. Just out of the blue, just woke up, went to Adelaide. Warne bowled us to victory on the last day in that Test, went to Perth, and I hadn't said anything. And Shane and I were sitting in the team room, and I just mentioned it, wanted to have a chat to him about something, and then he said the same thing, and then he said he was going to announce his retirement at the end of the series as well. So it was funny how it sort of all just out of the blue came about. Yes. And we finished up at the same time. But so my whole career I played with Shane at the other end, and I do consider myself an incredibly lucky person to think that I class him as a great mate, which is something I'll always treasure. And all the photos and everything that we've seen, and I remember 05 here, what an incredible series. But at the Oval, when we'd lost it, we knew it was out of reach, walking off arm in arm, Shane and I sort of waving to the crowd. And then at the SCG, when we did retire, they're really sort of special moments that I'll always treasure.
Yes. You tell a great story of Shane again. We're back to the confidence of the man, I think, and the talent, obviously. Yeah. When he was on 699 wickets, and it's in his last appearance in Melbourne. Yep. And you're standing at mid-on, Strauss is on strike. Tell us about the conversation that he had there with you.
Yeah, so Warne was always bowling to a plan. He had such good control. He could land the ball and do whatever he wanted, but he had a great cricket brain, and he knew what he was trying to do, how he's looking to get the batsman out. And Andrew Strauss was on strike. He was on 699 Test wickets, and he came up to me a couple hours before. He said, the plan here is I'm going to keep it tight to Straussy. Just not give him anything. If he's still on strike next over, I'll keep the first ball tight. Second one, I'll toss up. He's going to try to slog sweep me, and I'll bowl him through the gate. That was his plan. I said, sounds like a pretty good plan to me, Warne. And as it was, he kept the over tight. And this is just announced his retirement as well. So in front of probably 97,000 fans at the MCG. And that over, he said, Straussy was still on strike, kept the first ball tight. And the second ball, he sort of pointed to me, okay, this is a ball. and then he tosses the ball up. And I'm not sure if Andrew Strauss was listening into our conversation, but he didn't try to slog sweep him. He tried to whip him through mid-wicket. He tossed it up, the ball drifted, pitched, and spun back through the gate and bowled him, exactly as Warne had predicted. And then Warne was off and running around. He had 700 wickets in front of his home crowd. And it was a very special moment, but he predicted exactly how it would come up and then executed it. And then I caught up with Straussy a few months back, so I had a chat to him about the Lord's Test and his charity, and I mentioned it to him, and his face just dropped a bit. He goes, I remember that. He said, Shane had just moved mid-wicket out, and I thought, why is he doing that? That's just exactly where I want to hit the ball. That's just an easy shot.
Suckered him in.
And then when I told him he set him up, he couldn't believe it. But that was a great man.
Thank you, Glenn. Let's just catch up quickly. Mike Gatting's been facing the ball of the century again. Henry Moran was there to see how he got on 30 years later.
So here goes Mike Gatting facing the ball he faced 30 years ago. In comes Shane Warne. Oh, and he's walloped it through the leg side. That's what he should have done 30 years ago. Well, Mike, how was that? That went a little better than 30 years ago, that one there.
It's nice when you know where it's coming. So it's never a problem, is it? When you know where it's not coming, and you know when it's, whether it might bowl you around the legs or it might turn the other way, or so yes, it's nice when you know which way it's coming.
The flick through mid-wicket, I mean, that was the one, wasn't it?
It is, if you can play that shot. I mean, it's not one that I often play, but I mean, I think you might think about running down the wicket because you know it's going to come back into you and you can give it a whack. But it still feels too full to sweep. I mean, I'm not sure whether I might have to have a go at that when I do it real life, but it'll be quite interesting.
Well done, Mike Gatting, for being a good sport and well played too. I still wonder if that really was a carbon copy of the ball of the century, because I can't imagine flicking that through mid-wicket. But there it was, 30 years ago, on the pitch, of course, set at 90 degrees to how it is today. And I'm sitting up there to our left and watching that incredible delivery. And more about Shane Warne, really. I've got Michael Vaughan and Isha Goa with me, both of whom, of course, worked with Shane in Australia as predominantly television colleagues. Michael, of course, the one person in here to have actually done battle with Shane out there in the middle. Not in that game, clearly, but I don't know. You can't help when you listen to memories of Shane Warne. Clearly, well, that ball is the one that immediately springs to mind. But there were so many others, weren't there? So many others along the way. How did you go? I've got Andy to look up your stats actually, and I haven't checked myself. Oh, no. How did you think you got on against him?
I think I did okay.
What did you class as okay against Shane Warne?
Oh, I reckon if you're averaging over 35 against him, I'd take that.
Settle for that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not too sure, but all I remember is 2002 was the first time I faced him, and I just remember looking at loads of videos of Shane Warne. And it's not a good look when you're trying to prepare to face a bowler, because most of the videos that I was watching was of that great ball, Mike Gatting, many other balls, even Warne bowling to Phil Tufnell around the wicket. I even watched that contest, which is, please, YouTube that contest.
He didn't get him out, though. He didn't get him out.
He padded him away. Well, he kicked them away. So it kind of frightened the life out of me, thinking I was going to face this legend of a bowler. And I think, I was in an England side that a lot of the players have been beaten up by Australia in the 90s, early 2000s. So when I asked a few senior players how it was to face Shane Warne, there wasn't a great deal of positivity coming back. No. It's a nightmare, and if Glenn McGrath's at the other end where you just don't score, and Warne's got zooters, hooters, grooters, you name it, he's got millions of deliveries, and his personality and his persona. So I was absolutely, you can imagine, when I faced him. And after the first over of facing him, I expected something completely different to come out of his hand, because it was the great Shane Warne. But after a couple of deliveries, I thought, well, he's just a leg spinner, but a very good one. And what I faced in the first 2 or 3 deliveries was obviously very good spin, bit of shape into me as a right-hander. He bowled a couple of leggies, and then he showed me the googly quite early. I'd never faced him, so I think he wanted to just try and do me with the googly. I saw it quite early. I thought, okay. But it was his persona.
Yes.
And what he brought to bowling was not just leg spin and genius in terms of the skill that he delivered. He created a theatre that he put into your mind that he was going to bowl something completely different to what he was actually bowling. He bowled great leg spin, the best, but it was only leg spin primarily a lot. And that Zuta that he used to bowl, or I don't know what else he called it, the one that kind of skidded along.
Brilliant flipper he had.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that was more in the 90s when his shoulder wasn't sore. I got him when he probably couldn't quite get the kind of oomph onto that Zuta. And in the first game at Adelaide, that kind of slider that he bowled, it was kind of sticking in the surface anyway. It wasn't skidding on, so it was a delivery that you could get away with. So I actually did okay.
Yes. We had a brilliant series, that series.
But that was the first time of asking, of actually facing him. And it was purely a mindset that I was petrified facing him before I faced him. And actually, once I'd faced him for an over or two, I thought, well, if you take away all of the kind of noise that he produces and his body language. And it's not only his body language when you're facing him, it's when you're at the non-striker's end. He will say things to you at the non-striker's end that will get into your head. So he'll be telling you, oh, by the way, when you're down there, mate, get ready. You know, he'll be in your ear. You know, so you can imagine if you're a player or a batter that's got slightly a bit of negativity going on in your head and he's done you in the past, well, he was the past master of knowing when he had you. And I won't name names, but he certainly had a few of the England players of that tour.
Yes.
And you could see it in their eyes. You could just see it that he had them purely in the mind that when he had the ball in his hand, and there was times in the series when it spun, there was times in the series when it didn't spin at all, but you could just sense that he had this psyche over the players. That it was Shane Warne. He was a legend. He was a genius, but he just had the psyche as well. I always thought that's why he was a brilliant poker player. Because he could, you know, the glasses on, the cap on. That's how he plays his poker. You know, he could con anyone.
Yes.
He had a brilliant,
he was very good at it.
A brilliant art, and that's what he did so well as a bowler in terms of the psyche.
He was a proper pantomime dame when he bowled, wasn't he? He would have been great on stage in one of those pantomimes. Huge character, arms all over the place, and lots of chatter going on. So come on, let's reveal then.
Oh no!
No, did pretty well.
That series, you had a great series, that one.
Yeah, 284 balls, 131 runs, 3 dismissals. So average over 40.
There you are.
Oh, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll take that.
You would take that.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, he was slightly over the hill then, was he?
Not statistically, no.
Well, yeah. Oh, I'll take that. I mean, I got lucky here at Old Trafford on day one. I got 100 here, but it was flat. Didn't spin, so I got lucky here. I don't think I was in that often long enough in the second innings when it was really ragging. I'd kind of got out to McGrath before the damage of Warne came, so I was quite smart in that regard, that I probably never really got to face him in the second innings when the footholes were huge and those great deliveries that we seen. Andrew Strauss got balls at Edgbaston with a beauty.
Oh, yes.
I was pretty...
Strauss got some horrible balls.
Oh, yeah. He was good enough to survive long enough to get in, still be in when Warne came on. I was smart enough to be out by then.
Oh, good. So, Isha, when did you first see the ball of the century then?
Oh, it would have been early days. Growing up, watching England, but also this incredible Ashes battle and contest, and everyone used to talk about Shane Warne and ball of the century, and yeah, he had this persona about him that you know made things happen, and I loved watching players like that. And you know, growing up in cricket, watching that 2005 Ashes series, I knew that I wanted to hang out with him. I never imagined that I would, but during that series I was like, he looks like a cool guy and I want to hang out with him. And obviously he did really well that series. He came into that series not feeling that confident, and he spent maybe 3 hours with Terry Jenner the day before that first test match in the nets, working with him over and over again, just on his action and just building that belief again, because he spent that domestic season with Hampshire, and he'd been obviously talking to Kevin Peterson a lot. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the two players that I feel got hold of him in particular when it was turning, Kevin Peterson and Lakshman in India. When you watch back those highlights in Calcutta, that famous test match.
Game, yes.
Yeah.
Andy, what KP's record against Shane Warne? Because I think you're right, he definitely put some damage on him a couple of times. Not many, but
they were big mates as well, weren't they?
Yeah.
There must have been also that bit of added.
What I love about Shane Warne, you know, me and Ish have been very fortunate to work with him in Australia, and I've stayed at his house many times, and he ended up with 708 test wickets. And the amount of times we'd be sat just watching, I don't know, a bit of rugby league or Aussie rules at home, and just out of nowhere, he'd just go, I should have got 950. And when I go, what are you on about? He said, I should have got 950. DRS. And that's how his mind worked. He was such a competitor. And then, when he sees the modern player getting loads of spinners getting, those ones now that clip the pad, or, batter's got a big stride and he clips the pad and it's out. He'd go nuts. He'd go, how many would I have got?
How are you getting on with KP?
Peterson had a very good record against Warne, average 61 against him, faced him in 18 innings, 308 runs, 5 dismissals, 521 balls. They scored at a decent rate as well.
Big stride, Peterson, didn't he? I wonder if that helped actually to get there.
And also really long levers.
Yes.
So he could stretch out. Even if the stride wasn't big, he could get his hands out, and he had those amazing wrists. And that lap slog, that flick that he hit into. It was at Edgbaston he started playing that shot. He started flicking Shane into the stands on a regular basis. I remember Kevin's innings in Mumbai.
Yes.
He was a brilliant player of spin. He was the first of my... Graham Thorpe was a fantastic player of spin, but Graham was more of an attritional style player with a dance down and a lap slog, and but Kevin was the first of an England player that I've ever seen that really would damage real quality spin, like Murali, Shane Warne, Harbhajan, Kumble, world class spinners. Kevin had the ability to just put real damage on them. I'd never seen an England player. Trescothick was very good against spin, and he did it in a different way and did it very well at the top of the order. But Kevin, when he he used to come in at 4 or 5 when the ball's spinning and it's hot, the game, and he'd just go poof, poof, and get on top very soon. Yeah, he was a brilliant player of spin.
How were you with him early, Isha? Because we'd have known Shane through working with the men's game, him playing against him and so on, but then suddenly you are in the commentary box, I guess, probably the first time. Anyway, it must have been quite intimidating. I think I'd feel quite intimidated commentating alongside Shane Warne, just because it's Shane Warne. It's a ridiculous thing to think of. I wasn't intimidated by Geoffrey Boycott, but somehow you feel that Shane Warne, it would be quite an intimidating presence.
Yeah, and I think the feeling around that is maybe you feel like you have to earn his respect.
Yes.
And the first time I worked with him was actually in a T20 World Cup in Bangladesh, and I was there with Mel Jones, and he was brilliant. He was very respectful, and then I probably later on was at Sky, and then working in Australia with Triple M, and that's where I got to know him a bit more, because they would often try and get him on the show.
Well, that's a very relaxed. Just to explain to people here, that is a bit of a crazy radio station. Where actually, I suspect, if you're going to work with Shane Warne for the first time or so, that's probably quite a good environment to do it in, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think just through doing more and more, and I guess establishing myself in commentary, he probably saw me more in the media centre and recognised that I was doing more, and then really when we kind of hung out properly was during the 2019 Ashes.
Right.
So when I was working for Sky back then, and then obviously with Fox in Australia, and I've got a great story for you. So 2019 Headingley, we're there obviously watching this unbelievable match unfold, Ben Stokes, and it goes to 9 wickets, and I come out the chair. I'm like, okay, this is going to be done very soon, so get some Aussies on. And Rich, my husband's in the ground, and I just said, look, the train's up running. We'd had a period of time over those few weeks where we just hadn't been home, so I was like, train's up running, we need to try and get a lift off someone. Shane very kindly put his hand up, and I just messaged Rich and I said, babe, do you mind just going back to the hotel, because I haven't got our stuff ready?
Right.
Do you mind going back to the hotel to pack our stuff? Because I know that as soon as this is over, Shane is going to want to leave straight away.
Gone.
So thankfully he said no. So he didn't miss Ben Stokes and everything that unfolded, but
Shane was on his way, was he?
No, obviously that last wicket partnership happened. We were all there in the commentary box. It was amazing, and Shane very kindly waited for us to go and get our stuff so that he could drive us back down. But that journey's supposed to take about 3.5, 4 hours. I reckon I can say this now. I reckon we were back in about 2 hours. Yeah. And I was in the front seat, Rich was behind, and he had his windows down. He was smoking, they call it durries in Australia, smoking out the window. And it was the most incredible experience. But he had that way of making you feel so comfortable as well. When he got to know you and when he liked you, he was so supportive, he was so loyal, and he was great to both myself and Rich.
I mean, the thought of that, he quite liked his flashy cars, didn't he?
He did. He certainly drove a lot quicker than he bowled. He loved a fast car. You know, I was very fortunate. The last Christmas I spent with him, and I always remember I was staying in an apartment along the embankment in Melbourne, and Warne's at the Crown. He's got the suite penthouse. You can just imagine it's beautiful. Anyway, I'm 9:30, meet me outside. Yeah, okay. So I walk along, and all of a sudden, this G-Wagon comes flying out the car park, and he's Warne, windows down, fag on. Full car, full of presents. I said, Warne, what? Oh, I did it yesterday. Went to the shop, got everyone a present. Got to go down to meet the ex-wife and the kids. Okay, so we flying out of Melbourne. He's going down one-way streets. Starts going down the wrong way in the motorway. Reverses back. It's chaos. He gets to some lights. A young chap arrives in a little golf car, and he revved up the young kid and looks at Warne, and Warne looks at me. Beats him out of the black, so he's not beating me. So he's even competitive with someone on the streets. We ended up going down, dropped a few presents off, even competition with a dog. His ex-wife Simon's got a lovely dog. Yes. Dog comes up to Shane and he said to me, Taj, prefers me. You know, he's so competitive in everything he does. And then we ended up at his brother Jason's house for Christmas lunch. And I always remember it. We're all sat outside, and his mum and dad were there, and his kids. And then they said, dinner's served, so it was like a buffet. All the turkey, every angle of Christmas was sorted out. And on the end was a big bowl of lasagna. So I'm getting my turkey on the plate. And
that's unusual for Christmas.
Yeah, I looked at that. I thought, that's a bit strange. And a load of bread rolls, and Warne goes straight to lasagna, big plate. 2 huge chunks of lasagna on the plate. Gets 3 bread rolls, puts it on his plate. We go and sit round. He then turns to Jackson, his son, and his son had got a bit of turkey with no veg. And Warne looks at Jackson, and he just said, come on, Jackson, you've got to have a bit of veg. And I'm looking at Warne's plate. All he's got is lasagna. Oh, by the way, and massive chunks of butter.
Oh, right.
Right, and then he doesn't use a knife, uses his hand, rips open the bread rolls. He then gets a fork, massive chunk of lasagna in the bread roll, big chunk of butter, uses a knife to doesn't spread it, probably just and he squashes it, and he goes, I forgot, gets some tomato ketchup.
Oh, no.
Gets the ketchup out, puts it over the lasagna. He had lasagna sandwiches for Christmas dinner. And then he drives us back. Yes, he's a bit fast, back to Melbourne. But all the way, he was so proud of Melbourne. He adored Melbourne. And
he would send us regular weather reports. Sydney, Melbourne. The difference between the two. He'd probably be sending us a weather report right now.
Yeah, well, he would be. He said, Manchester's similar to Sydney. And he went past, and he was showing me every house, so proud of, Melbourne and all these great... And I reckon on the way back, I said, Warne, you've just driven me about, I reckon you've bought about 55 houses on the way. I'm going to get that one, he was so proud of Melbourne. But as Isha said, he was so generous with his time. I saw him with so many people, anyone that wanted to talk spin. So if you brought a kid to him and said, my kid's a leg spinner, can you give, whoever the young boy or girl was, can you give them 10 minutes of your time?
You've seen him on the outfield with kids.
He would give anybody that wanted to talk, in particular leg spin, as much time. And if there was someone there just bowling spin, he'd be there just teaching them and giving them all the tips and all the kind of psychology tips, technical tips. I think, and I'm sure people, he absolutely adored cricket. He really did.
He was such a badger, and even when he wasn't working on it, he'd be messaging you about the games that you were working on or anything that he was watching, and he'd be like, giving his thoughts on that particular match. But that's something I don't think we talk about as much with Warne, because he did so much other stuff on the field and was such a larger-than-life character. But the way he broadcasted was a real inspiration to me in particular, because of the way he simplified the game and he was able to transcend the sport, obviously, but the way he was able to talk about cricket and make it so easy to understand for people who weren't cricket aficionados. I was really inspired by it. Anytime he talked about leg spin, obviously, it was literally like you could not take your eyes off him. He was such a magnetic personality anyway, but he found, and that was really important to him, but being part of that Channel 9 commentary box and the history of Channel 9 commentary, working with Kerry Packer and all those that had gone before, history was really important to him. So he knew a lot about the history of the game. And he would take that into any commentary box that he went into, around that respect, around commentators that had gone before, and the etiquette of broadcast. But
he cared about that. It's interesting because you look at some who come breezing in and you don't feel they're actually working terribly hard at it. But Shane Warne was a worker.
He was, and etiquette was important to him until we obviously went to Fox Cricket and we had these headsets on, where it's very hard when you're on a bit of a roll to stop talking. So that. We would be putting up signs of just let it breathe on the window.
Well, shut up.
And Warne would come in and go, who's that for? But it was. I mean, look, he was such an amazing broadcaster, I think, and his respect for people around him as well. I very much felt that. And when I first came into the commentary box, as you mentioned, it could have been quite an intimidating place, and not that I didn't get support from other commentators and pundits and broadcasters, but when I felt like I had Shane's respect, that's yes. When it just gave me that even more confidence, because I felt like I had the respect of everyone else.
Definitely.
And he was just so encouraging. He would ask you your thoughts. I mean, obviously he would ask you yours, Michael, but he would ask me my thoughts on the game, and that just gave me such a boost, and that was just him all over, really. He would make people feel 10 times taller, and that's what I actually see in Brendan and Ben now. I know that Ben was hugely influenced by Shane, but and I think he'd be absolutely loving the weighing.
We must say it was his father Keith's birthday. He was 80 just a few days ago. I know he's been listening, so if you're listening, Keith, happy birthday.
Yeah, that's nice. It's actually what you said there, which is really interesting, because in my experience, the more talented and more natural the cricketer, actually the more difficult that person finds it to actually pass that on to people. I think of coaches who had been incredibly talented players themselves. They haven't either, they don't quite understand what it means to break the game down so that lesser mortals can actually benefit from what they're saying to them. And that's certainly been the case in my playing career. And I think going on through England, someone like Troy Cooley, for instance, who was a very ordinary first-class cricketer, very short career, problems with no balls, finished him off, played for Tasmania. Brilliant coach, wonderful coach, because he could actually relate to the people who he was teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think Shane, I think he has been a good coach. I think he's helped so many players around the world with, I wouldn't say he's probably the kind of coach that would work on technique, but purely on mindset. And, your body language, everything's positive, everything's possible. You can only imagine him up there watching England play, and he'd be like, "Whoa, wish I was down there."
Yes, he'd have liked this.
Oh, he would.
He'd like the challenge of bowling at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he'd like to have a go at trying to play against the Baz bowlers. But I think in terms of the way England have played Test match cricket in the last year and a half, it's almost exactly the way that Shane Warne would want Test match cricket to be played, and it's no surprise Rob Key is a good friend of Shane's, and Baz McCullum is a good friend. So, I do think there's, and I think if you asked Rob Key about the influences in his cricketing life, I bet you Shane Warne's quite clear. I know Steve Waugh had a big impact on Rob Key, but I reckon Warne has had a huge impact on Rob Key's mindset, and it certainly helped English cricket. I mean, Shane Warne, he got 40 wickets in 2005, but I always felt he was so genuine with applause. I remember him many times. I think Kev at the Oval, he ran up and shook his hand on the back of that tremendous 100. Freddie at Edgbaston, I remember him shaking and coming in our dressing room after the game and shaking everyone's hand. Sat there, had a pop or two and a fag or two with one or two of the players, but so genuine in his kind of want for everyone to learn, and be better players, better people, and try and play the game the right way.
Yeah. Still raining here. Let's keeping an eye out for everybody. And those poor old stewards are still standing out there with their umbrellas up, and so are those hardy souls I was talking about in that big stand over to our left. It's funny, listening back to the commentary all those years ago, 30 years ago, on that ball, I remember commentating a little bit afterwards, and saying, "Wow, this is going to." There was now so many wrist spinners, leg spinners. Young kids have seen that. You know, what a great boost it's going to be for wrist spin. Well, where are they? That's what I'm. You know, it actually never happened, and my own theory of why it never really happened is because it was such a damn difficult thing to do. And bowling wrist spin and bowling it so accurately and bowling it like Shane Warne, well, there's only been probably one person who's ever been able to do it like that, and that was him. But it did feel at the time that was going to be an inspiration for so many people.
Yeah.
Every one or two come through, but not the numbers that I imagined at the time would come.
No, I mean, there's so many that play T20 cricket, but in T20 cricket, actually, if you're consistent, you go. So inconsistency in T20 cricket, so if you've got all the variations, which all the leg spinners have, and bowl slightly inconsistent, that's more dangerous than being consistent in T20 cricket, because you can be lined up. I mean, Warne is the only leg spinner that's mastered all three formats. You know, there's not many, I can't think of any that have mastered all three formats like Shane Warne. I mean, Shane Warne and T20 cricket was, you only have to look at Rajasthan Royals. You know, he won them that title pretty much single-handed with a money ball system of picking a load of players, and they didn't have the budget like some of the other teams, but his personality and his mindset just, and also the ability to con the opposition into believing that your tactics were a bit like England at the minute. They're playing this expansive game that it's quite hard to play against because you haven't played against it. And I think it surprised his team. Whereas Warne back in, I think it's 2008, the first IPL, he set all these cool, funky fields. And I think it completely surprised the opposition. They didn't know what to do with it. The year after when it was tried, they probably thought, I've seen that before. You can't con us twice. But he was a master at making a group of people. And whether it was in the commentary box at Hampshire, you speak about to any of the old Hampshire players that played in that dressing room, he made you feel 20 times bigger than what you were. And he made you spring through the door and enjoy life, and enjoy whether it's commentating, playing the game. I've played a load of golf with him. I mean, it's the greatest fun that you can have for 4 hours. I mean, the language is atrocious, but it's the greatest time to be on a golf course with Shane. He genuinely thinks he can win the Masters. He honestly thinks he's going to shoot 5 under every day, and he shoots 10 over every time. But he arrives on the. What happens
when he doesn't though? Does he get grumpy about it, or
no? Just the expletives come out more and more, and it's not his fault. It's the greens.
Of course,
the greens aren't rolling
Clubs
quick enough. Yeah, and the club or the grips aren't on properly, or something's not quite right with his equipment. But so competitive.
He was just a big kid, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Wasn't he? I mean, like some of the things he used to throw up in rain breaks, you know, the most underrated comments, and in the slip cord, and I'm sure they had lots of chats in there as well, just about, you know, top 3 or he would throw these challenges up and quizzes up all the time, but he loved it, and he made everyone feel really, really special.
Yeah. You ever tried bowling leg spin?
I have. I can only bowl googlies for some reason.
Okay.
I can't bowl an actual leg spin.
Isn't it the hardest thing? And I always remember, when I tried for I always end up putting rather a funny face when I was trying to do it as well. Really strange, because it is such an unusual thing to do, that this rather silly face came on at the same time. But, God, it's hard.
I tell you, I saw the picture of Rian Ahmed actually meeting Shane Warne. It was a few years ago when Rian was, I think it was at Lord's, I think it was 15. And I just think that's great that actually Rehan's the next generation for England's leg spinners. You know, and to think that he's had a session with the late great Shane Warne is and that's exactly as I said earlier. He would give anyone a bit of time.
Yes.
Anyone that wants to bowl a bit of the tweak, a bit of the leg spin, the hardest art of them all in the game.
Definitely.
He'd give
and
you
to bowl
time.
it so accurately, that was the key.
I mean, I actually no one knows this. I was his last ever wicket. So forget his 708. So we play in the Dunhill Links golf tournament every year, and it was on the Saturday night. A couple of years ago, and it was throughout the pandemic. But so you had to be in bubbles, like bubbles of 6, and our bubble of 6 was myself, Joe Root, Goffey, Shane Warne. I think Piers Morgan was in there. Can't remember who the 5th one. And we were in the marquee. You had to be on a table of 6, and you kind of went. And there was a lounge area. And it got a bit late, probably about 3 a.m. We'd had a few, a bit worse for wear. And Warne gets a bit of fruit out and starts bowling, and orange. And I said, come on, let's have a game of cricket. So there was no bat, obviously, there. So I batted with a tequila ball. And if it's somewhere online, and he's bowled me. It's like the ball that did Gattin.
Well, ball of the century.
His first ball, it's with an orange, and he flicks it out, and it rags, and it beats the outside edge of my tequila bottle. And I think the speakers were the stumps, and he just sticks in the speaker, and he's celebrating. Got you again. There you go. So that was his last wicket.
10 times. Wait a minute, listen to this. Come on, Kenny. I've got. Ah!
Well, even in the bubbles in Southampton, I hate to think Adam Mountford, our producer, might have clobbered him for a six.
Dealt with him.
But Shane Warne actually came on to bowl in the sort of car park situation, with a tennis ball. Most people would inclined to say, "No, thanks very much. My bowling days are over." He was in there. He was in there bowling away.
There's actually some amazing footage. Remember when Shane Warne, so Rashid Khan worshipped him, and he's a big star in Australia, and so Fox decided to put him and Shane together, and Mark Howard hosted the whole thing, and he hadn't warmed up. I don't think he'd warmed up at all, and he came in, and it's the most amazing vision of both of them bowling together at the same time, and Warnie's action, and it literally comes out perfectly. It lands, it spins, and then you've got Rashid Khan, who's a completely different style of leg spin bowler, and it's available, I think, on YouTube. But that was really riveting to watch. That whole piece was just incredible for any cricket aficionados.
We're going to go look it up. The Australians got a great word, which I think sums up Shane off the field. I've got moving on to sort of the captain that Australia never had, if you like. People always refer to him as that.
Absolutely.
And that word is larrikin. And if you're listening in Australia, you know exactly what I mean. It's someone who has a good time. He's a bit of a larrikin, isn't he? I guess that's why Shane never was that captain that Australia never had.
Maybe. When he did captain, he did very, very well. Larrikin's probably the right word. I mean, we're on air. What time is it? I don't think it's fair and right to tell some of the stories about Shane Warne, what he got up to. But I think it was Glenn earlier said he's lived. He lived an incredible life. And what people don't forget, in Australia, he was a superstar. He couldn't go anywhere. There was a time, Adam Gilchrist is a superstar in Australia, but there was a bar opening in Brisbane 2 or 3 years ago. Then we were down there commentating, and we get invited down, and it was quite a large bar. And Warne just sitting in the hotel, come on, let's go down. I said, you sure? Come on, we'll go down. So we go down, and we arrive, and I remember it to this day. We walked in, me, Gilly and Shane. Shane's at the back. And I sneak in and get a few smacks on the back of the head, walk round. It takes me 3 minutes to walk around the bar. It takes Gilly about 6 minutes to walk around the bar. It took Shane Warne about an hour to walk around. Every single person wanted to speak to Shane, and he used to get a bit annoyed by some of that because it was his private space, having a bit of fun. He just was such a stupid, and I think people don't realise how hard it was at times for him because he did do a few things that were a bit against the grain, if you like. But I think being Shane in Australia, in England, I think that's why I love the UK. I think he loved London because I think he could just be himself. He could just.
Yeah, people loved him here though.
Yeah, they do. And he's loved wherever he goes. Yeah. But in Australia, I think they felt that they owned him a bit, and they needed to always be kind of touching him, and almost felt like he was part of them.
Most famous Australian?
He won't be far off.
No.
Yeah.
Glenn McGrath.
But he would always own up. I think he fronted up to things that he got himself into.
To misdemeanors.
Yeah. And that was part and parcel of who he was as a person. And
that's why people loved him, I think.
I think that is why, because he didn't hide it. It was all out there for everyone to see, and everyone could see it. And it was, I think it did affect him sometimes because he just wanted to be a normal guy, and that's probably why people did love him, because they felt he was so accessible. But he had tremendous gratitude for everything that he'd done in his life and what he'd been able to experience. But he did front up.
Yes, he
did. And that was I think that was what was so admired about him.
Lovely stories. Thanks you two, Michael and Isha. 30 years ago, I can hardly believe it, but there we go. And it's so sad that Shane isn't... well, he'd have been marching up and down outside here talking animatedly about something were he here today.